Let's bring in my very special guest for the next half an hour, in fact, my old friend, my old sparring partner, TV wife, Alex Phillips. Hello, Alex.
Hello. We've had the most sort of successful, long-lasting and non-acrimonious divorce of any sort of former husband and wife in history.
Yeah. Ours was always a relationship. I never realised, I never thought it would work, but it sort of does. God knows why. Well, listen, thanks for joining us, but I wanted to run this by you, Alex. It's one particular case that highlights the absurdity, the horror, really, of what's happened to people like Lucy Connolly, who is doing 31 months for a few hurty words on social media. We had her husband, Raymond Connelly, on earlier in the show. Now, yesterday at Preston Crown Court, a refugee and a migrant called Tuam Nurien, he appeared in court. He subjected a terrified woman to a horrifying sexual assault in Barrow-in-Furness, in the town centre, in the early hours of the morning. He is today, what happened was, in the manner of these things, he kept denying, no. Will you plead guilty? No. For 2 years, he's refused to plead guilty, and this always happens. At the last moment, they plead guilty so they can get a lighter sentence. So at the very last moment, in Preston Crown Court, Tuam Nurien suddenly pleaded guilty to this horrific offence, subjecting a poor victim to a terrifying sexual ordeal in the middle of Barrow-in-Furness town centre in the small hours. He got 9 months. He got 9 months. By the way, that, of course, being less than a year under the current regulations, means he will not face deportation. Lucy Connolly found out this week that her appeal against her grotesquely disproportionately long sentence had failed. She will stay in jail. What the hell is going on, Alex?
I have no idea what's going on. And the reason this smites so deeply is because when we think of justice, when we think about a crime and the sort of punishment that someone should have levelled against them, we think about the impact on other people. We think about lasting damage. We think about the fact that if a woman or a young girl has been brutally raped or abused, that will be with her and wreck the rest of her life. That is pure evil. Then you think about Lucy Connolly writing this tweet. Now, if it was ever proven that when she wrote this tweet, she did so with the intent of stirring up anger and making people go and burn down hotels and people had died as a result, then may she rot in that prison. But I think we all know that that wasn't what went on here. She just wrote a load of careless words, however ugly they may be, however vile the sentiment may have been. She did what so many people do on social media, anonymously, with that veil of anonymity every single day. All the internet trolls, all the people who just want to let off some steam after a bottle of Chardonnay. She wrote careless, vile words. And then, when the red mist is cleared, she deleted them. And then all of her other tweets didn't sound like that at all. She said, I don't want rioting in this country. She had no idea that she might be causing people to actually go and do things. It wasn't, I don't believe, direct incitement. And I don't know, and nobody knows, whether people read that and said, right, that's exactly what I'm going to do. We don't know that because it never went to court. And so you look at this and you think, she wrote something really vile in the heat of the moment and later deleted it. Did it have any lasting damage on people? Mm-hmm. Well, the person it is going to have lasting damage on is her 12-year-old daughter, who doesn't get to see a mum in those critical years of her upbringing. Her mother, who before this one incident was a childminder to children of all ethnicities, who had had trauma of losing a child herself. And in that tweet, and it's funny, every time the press quotes that tweet, they cut out the final segment, where she said what she willed to happen. She said, because I think of all the parents who have lost little children and the suffering that they will endure. That bit, whenever this is being reported, is always extracted.
Yeah, a woman who lost her own little boy tragically a year before. That's why she felt so emotionally het up after learning about these horrible murders in Southport. As Ray, her husband, said, and Lucy has said, you know, the tweet was not a nice tweet. You know, she realised, but she did it in the heat of the moment. It was a mother sympathising with other mothers. Now, you know, as I say, I don't think in a Western democracy that anyone should ever be sent to jail for what they bang out on a keyboard on social media. If you must punish people, OK, but don't send them to jail. And for God's sake, 31 months. Do you know that one of the rape gang culprits, a guy in Telford, who admitted raping an underage little girl, apparently she was about 11, he got 9 months.
Right.
So this allegation or of two-tier justice, it's not false. It's a thing. It happens, and we've got to do something about it.
And how dangerous is it that when we start feeling our judicial system has been politicised and it's all operating for a political purpose, then it's not an actual independent judicial system. How much we feel that certain people might have had reduced sentences because actually, well, mitigating circumstances, they came over on a small boat. Well, if we do this, there might be reprisals from their community. Or in the case of Lucy Connolly, we have to make an example of somebody to quell the risk that the public are going to riot against something, frankly, that was so abhorrent and appalling and gut-wrenching. It needed to be contained because people were going to take to those streets because what happened was beyond an atrocity. But using somebody as an example, taking this woman and putting her in prison as an example to strike fear into the hearts of the nation is the sort of tactic that only a crazy dictator uses. And I always want to, and people say you can't compare the cases, they're totally different. But I think you can compare the cases a little bit of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Lucy Connolly. Nazanin Zaghari, I mean, Iran's an evil, hostile regime. I'm not condoning Iran at all. But this was a woman who'd been a British citizen for only a short period of time, very short period of time, wasn't even a year, I don't believe. Went back to Iran, and Iran decided in order to have leverage over the United Kingdom, it was going to put her in prison and then force the United Kingdom to start making concessions or making political decisions and fighting for her release. Now, everyone can point the finger at what Iran did and said that was vile. And didn't the newspapers, didn't they go to town on that case day after day, week after week? And I'm not saying that that wasn't wrong. But if our own government can take someone as political leverage, put them in prison for a ridiculous amount of time in order to try and quell dissent in our own country, in order to use this as a political piece for a different outcome, a political outcome, then there are parallels. And yet this woman is she's our citizen. She's born, she's in this country, she's served this country, she's brought up other people's children, she's paid her taxes, she hasn't got a speck on her record book, not saying that Nazanin did either. But why can't we have the same emotive outpouring for her as we did for Nazanin? Why can't we say this is a woman who is wrongly imprisoned because the government is using this to fulfill an agenda?
Talking to the government, Alex, what did you make of, if you haven't seen it, we'll play it for you, but you've probably seen it, when, after Lucy's appeal shockingly failed, and that idiot judge, Lord Justice Holroyd, said there can be no argument to suggest that her 31-month sentence for hurty words on Twitter is manifestly excessive. Oh, yeah, there can. There can be lots of arguments it's manifestly excessive. But after that, Keir Starmer, our dear leader, was interviewed on television, intercepted on one of his PR visits to some shop or other. And so I was asked, well, Lucy Connolly's appeal, what do you think of it? You know, it got rejected. And he went, I'm sorry, I don't know the details, not across the details of that case. You mean the most famous case in Britain, the one that's all over the front pages every day? You mean the one that's all over the television news bulletins every day? The one that's all over the radio every day? The one that Donald Trump was talking about in the White House 2 days ago? You're not across the details. I mean, not only is that a lie, it's an insult to our intelligence. And doesn't he owe us some kind of statement on this famous, should I say, notorious case? What kind of a man is the Prime Minister of this country?
Well, a man who probably doesn't even want to see her visitation rights because that would cause too much of an uproar amongst the community if there are paparazzi snapping photos of her and news reports about here she's seeing her daughter for the very first time in however many months, getting any sort of access to her. It's a man who basically is scrambling to try and stay in control and keep control of situations that are way beyond his capabilities. A man who doesn't necessarily know what he's doing, quite frankly. It just pulls the lead.
That's the understatement of the year.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that if he had a real moral backbone somewhere at night when he went to sleep, he would think about Lucy Connolly and think that woman shouldn't be locked up. Because look, I'm reflecting on something that's happened to me at the weekend with horrible words I used that I instantly regretted. You know, you have a drink, you say something awful, and then you wish you could get in a time machine and go back and not say them.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, bad stuff happens. We all have done it, right?
Yeah.
Nobody walking on this planet has never said anything they didn't regret. It's the same situation with her. It was just typed.
Yeah, she made a mistake in the heat of the moment, and when you understand why she was so emotionally upset, you can't help but say, poor woman. Now, you know, nobody condones what she wrote, but we know why she did it. It was out of sympathy for her fellow mothers, 3 mothers who'd lost their little girls, just like she had lost her little boy a year before. That's why she did it, and that's why it's outrageous that this justice system, this 2-tier justice system, isn't prepared to show her any mercy at all. Let's bear in mind, out of 385 or so people that went to jail with indecent haste after those summer riots, you know, obviously ordered by Keir, get them banged up and get them banged up fast and give them hefty sentences. That was the instruction from Downing Street, no doubt about it. Out of those 385, 12 went to jail for tweets, for posts on Facebook, for social media posts. None of them should have gone to jail. This Prime Minister, he then says, I'm all for freedom of speech. Anybody, any leader who presides over a system that jails people for what they write on social media, he's not in favour of free speech. He is the enemy of free speech. I think it's a disgrace. It's a scandal.
Can you imagine how we would react to another country doing this? Okay? Yeah. How we would react to protesters in Iran who don't want to wear the hijab being put into prison. Yeah. How we would react to an anti-government march who might have said, you know, chop off the head of the leader, but those people being put in prison. How we would react to the idea that saying words and speaking passionately about something, even if the words used are grotesque. But everyone in this country has a grip on reality. I'm sure they do, unless they choose not to. And anybody, I'm sure, with half a brain can look at what she said and look at her, put 2 and 2 together and make 4, and say that this was an otherwise upstanding young woman who was no threat to society, who just wrote something grim. It's that simple, and we've all done it in the heat of moment.
Yeah, well, of course, everybody makes mistakes, and that's why she should be forgiven. There's an excuse for her mistake, but I've got to finish on this topic. This will annoy you, I think. Last night, I spoke to Isabel Oakeshott, and this judge, the appeal court judge, Lord Justice Holroyd, to be fair, he's one of 3 judges. It's always a panel of judges, but he's the lead. He's the one who said there can be no argument that her sentence was manifestly excessive. Yeah, there can. Anyway, he's got a track record of drastically reducing the sentences of sex criminals, of paedophiles and rapists. I won't bore you with all of them, but we found 5 examples where he reduced the sentences of serious sex criminals. But the one that amused me the most, I shouldn't say that's probably the wrong word, but he said that the sentence of a guy called Matthew Falder, he was a Cambridge graduate in 2018. He remains one of Britain's most prolific paedophiles. Lord Justice Holroyd, he reduced this guy, this monster's 32-year prison sentence to 25 years. The court accepted the submission, and guess what Lord Justice Holroyd's statement on this was? That the 32-year prison sentence was, drum roll, manifestly excessive.
You know, Kevin, the truth of the matter is, and this isn't spoken about enough, most paedophiles barely get a whiff of justice levelled against them. There are so many paedophilic incidents and so many paedophilic reports in this country. If we were to bang them all up in prison, there aren't enough prisons in all of Europe to do that. And it's almost one of those things, it's like, well, how bad was it? Really, were they doing this? Were they actively doing that? And yet, all of a sudden, despite overcrowded prisons, when it came to those riots, and also a justice system that doesn't work before like a 2-year wait list, that we were able to have the judicification of law, these televised trials of people dragged off the street, taken straight to prison. That man, that Weasley little one who looks like a proper Hugo in his wig, banging his little hammer, sentencing everyone, televised. I mean, when do we do this? We don't televise court cases. The whole thing was a spectacle, a theatre, a performance to make sure that the British people did not riot. Yeah. Now, while that might have justification, because rioting tears apart a country, its economy, it creates lasting damage that is very, very hard to repair. So while on some part controlling that and mitigating it is purposeful, the manner in which this has been done, and let's not forget there was a man who died in prison during...
Yes, yeah. He was jailed for holding up a placard, by the way. Right. This is another thing about Lucy Connolly, of course, that she got a considerably longer sentence than many of the actual rioters. People who were throwing bricks at the cops, people who were trying to set fire to mosques and asylum seeker hotels got less than Lucy Connolly.
One last thing I've got to say, Kev, because it's so important to point this out, so important about looking at the fabrication and the lies and the curation of what went on during that period. We now know that he knew the details of that case. He knew them.
Of course he did.
He knew what was later released to the public. At the time where he was presiding over all of this pantomime, he knew the truth.
Yeah, he did. I've got one last question for you. Before we go to break, and we're going to discuss the Chagos Islands after that break. Explain this to me. Why is Lucy Connolly in jail? Why was she jailed for such a long time while the self-confessed child sex abuser, paedophile, former BBC newsreader Hugh Edwards walks the streets free? Why is that?
Oh, because it's very simple. Like I said, if you actually were to jail every single paedophile who's received, even Category 8 images on their phone, there's not enough prison spaces in all of Europe to accommodate just the British ones. So that is why that is, because the argument would be, well, he hadn't actually gone and physically committed the abuse on the children himself. But we forget, of course, that there was that whole element of coercion and paying someone vulnerable. And because, like I said before, the whole curation of that process during the riots was a pantomime to try and quell the anger of British people. And whilst I think that it's important to try and stop rioting, you have to look at yourself as a government, ask the question, why are they rioting? The fact that they failed to handle this. He didn't come to a lectern after that Southport stabbing and speak to us. He didn't say that what happened was disgusting, that this person had terrorist manuals, that he was going to crack down on the terrorist gangs in the same way he's going to supposedly crack down on people trafficking. He didn't do that. When he did take to a lectern, he didn't offer those words of comfort. He just called us all far-right
thugs. And by the way, just last point on that, Alex, a couple of weeks ago, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Police, a kind of police watchdog on which senior officers sit, they published a very extensive report on the Southport riots and the other riots, particularly the Southport riots, in which they concluded, they said that actually these riots were not political, that the political beliefs of the rioters was not relevant. They were protesting against decisions by the government to do with asylum seekers and migrants. In other words, the entire premise of Keir Starmer's attack on these rioters, far-right thugs, was dismissed. You know, this guy just makes it up as he goes along.
How do you say they weren't political? They were protesting the government's decisions.
Yeah,
huh?
Yeah. Well, they were. That's what they were. They were protesting against the migrant crisis.
That person in number 10, when the Southport atrocity happened, should have had the backbone to speak to the nation, to give us the information, to tell us what had went on, to actually say this is disgusting, that I'm going to fight it, I'm going to beat Islamism wherever it raises its ugly head in this country. He should have done that. Why didn't he? Weakness. Yeah. Weak.
That sums him up very nicely put. Thrice weak. Now, we're going to go to break now.